Alright guys, we are continuing right now. We're in the MongoDB Atlas and here we can see our clusters. So for the cluster 0, we can click on collections, and just because I've already created some collections, you can be able to see them here. So here you have a way of creating new databases, and I've created the database booking and the default test database. Inside of those databases, we have collections, just like tables in MySQL, but we're using non-structural databases. So if we click on some of the tables, we can visually see that inside we have a JSON representation of objects. So we don't have predefined fields inside. Also for the reservations, we can store any type of data inside. So right now, we will start Visual Studio Code. And if you remember, this was our application source folder of the booking application. So inside of our configuration, we have for development certain keys exported, and we see that here actually we are connecting to the database called test. So this means that actually we are connecting to this database and we already have some collections inside. And now we will continue working on this server file, server.js. If you can remember, we were requiring some packages, and then we tried to connect to MongoDB with our configuration settings for the database and the passwords. We will try to grab and insert data in those collections. Afterwards, we can test our server with Postman. So let's start. First, we would like to create a new variable which will hold the connection to our MongoDB database. So just create this variable right now. So we'll type const connection equals to mongoose, and we see here we have a reference to the connection object. Just because we'll be using asynchronous connection to the database, we can actually notify the users when we connect to the database. So we will just type connection.once. So once we are connected and it's open the connection, we would like to execute a function to write that the database connection is established. So we'll type mongodb connection established. So that's what we're going to do now. We save the document, and here, once inside of our project, we'll type node source directory and then server.js. So this file, server.js, we would like to execute it right now and to start it. And we see MongoDB connection established opening. Then we would like this server to listen to some port. For this, first we'll create a variable for the port. So we'll type const port equals, we use 8080 port, or if we are in other production environment, we will get the variable port from the remote environment, let's say. So we'll type process.environment.port variable. This way we can set this variable on a remote machine to whatever port we would like, or it can be predefined in the machine. Alright, so we have the port, and now we'll just type app.listen, which will make this server to listen on a specific port. First parameter will be the port, and then we'll just write to the user that our server is listening to this port. So we can type console log server is running on port, and we can add the port variable here. So let's save the application and again run the server. And we see that we have been running on port 8080. Alright, so this means that once we are in the browser, actually we can try to access our application. So we can type our localhost and then port 8080. And at least we see some error, but this is because we haven't set paths already. But Actually, our server is starting to respond. So before starting to listen on this board, we'll write here our routes. In order to use routes, we'll use 3 different types of routes. First, we'll try to derive variables from Express router. So we can type a variable called room routes, and we'll initialize it with Express router. It's a friendly functional router, and then we can use this roam routes variable in a way that if we are trying to access a specific URL, we can load up this router here. Let me show you what I mean. So we can type up use, and for whenever we are trying to access the URL roams, then we would like to load up the route specified in this variable, roam routes. Right now it's empty, but now we will create our first route. So we will use the variable, we will just type roam routes dot route. Whenever we are accessing the pure route, so we are going just in the rooms URL with the method get. We'll get a callback function which will contain the request and the response we would like to send to the user. And once we have those variables, we can just, in the response, we would like to send hi to the user. So once again, what does this mean? First, we are loading up the router, and then we are saying that for each request towards this URL /rooms, and then we will dive deep, and this is sub-route. So whenever we are accessing rooms with the slash afterwards, we'll get a request, and for the response, we'll just send hi to the user. Let's save and once again restart the server and try to access this URL to see it in action. So we'll just type here rooms, and we see the response hi sent to us. Okay, now we know how to handle different routes through our custom routers and to attach them to specific paths of our application. The next thing we would like to do is actually to create models which will correspond to our database. So here, as you can remember, we have reservations and rooms, and right now we'll create models for them. So we can use those models inside of our server. First, we'll create a model for the rooms. So we'll type var room equal mongoose.model, and our model will be called room. And then we would like inside to have the following fields. These are just like database fields. So we'll type house name, it will be of type string, and also we'll have a field called reserved. It will be array of strings. Basically, we are here finding a house name, and then on which dates it will be reserved, this house name. So once we have this model, we can use it inside of our routes. So instead of sending hi to the user, here once we are accessing this URL rooms, we can use the newly created room model. And we can just type room.find. So this is a method of MongoDB, and actually it will get all the created rooms. So as a first parameter, we'll pass this usually the filter criteria. It will be empty. And the second parameter, once we get the rooms, we'll have either error or result from this query we are doing find. So we'll type function, and we'll get either error or result. In the function body, we will just check if there is an error, so we cannot grab the data. We'll just send in the response, so in this variable response here, we will send the error inside. In other cases, so we'll just type else, and we'll send all the data we are grabbing from the database. So we'll just type response. We'll send the data as a JSON, and actually we are expecting the data as a JSON. So this is important for the response.json. This result, it has to be of type of JSON in order to be interpreted. All right, so let's format the document and explain what's going on once again. So once we are going to this rooms and slash afterwards root, we'll get a request and a response. We are querying our room model, which we just created here in the Mongos, and we're trying to find all the records. And when we run this query, if there is an error, we send in the response to the user. Otherwise, we send the data as a JSON format. Also, we would like to change here the requests to be routed to URL all. So this way we have to access rooms / all. Let's save and once again test our server. So if we type rooms all, we are not quite ready. Okay, there is some error here. Of course, it's just string here, not strings. So we start again the server. It's listening on port 8080. There is a connection to MongoDB established. And if we refresh the URL, we see actually the raw data fetched from our database on which dates and which house name has been reserved. If we check in our remote database, the rooms inside of the array, we can see all the dates those rooms are being reserved. So we managed to connect to the database and fetch some data from there. The next thing to do is to install one service which will help us to monitor this server.js file. So we should not stop it every time and restart it after making some changes. It's called node-mon. So we'll type sudo npm install node-mon. To be able to install Node Monitor, we'll have to install it globally to be accessible not only from our project but within other projects, so we can also start it. And so we will use this switch -g. After it's installed, we will use it by typing node-mon, and then we'll just type the path to our source server file. So we'll just type source server.js, and this will automatically monitor our file for changes and restart it when we change something on the file. So for example, we add some commands here, and the moment we save, we see that the file is changed and again restarted. This saves a lot of time, and it will help us in the development process.